love of my life. He was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Paul was 36, and now he likely had months to a few years left to live. Paul and I met when we were both first-year med students at Yale. He was smart and kind and super funny. He kept a gorilla suit in the trunk of his car, and he used to say, "It's for emergencies only." I fell in love with Paul when I watched the care that he took with his patients. He would stay late talking with them, seeking to understand the experience of illness and not just its technicalities. He later told me he fell in love with me when he saw me cry over an EKG of a heart that had ceased beating. We didn't know it then, but even in the heady days of young love, we were learning how to approach suffering together. We got married and became doctors. I was working as an internist, and Paul was finishing his residency in neurosurgery right over there. When he started to lose weight, he developed excruciating back pain and then a cough that wouldn't go away. And when he was admitted to the hospital, a CT scan found tumors in Paul's lungs and in his bones. We had both cared for patients with devastating illnesses, and now it was our turn. We lived with Paul's illness for 22 months. He wrote a memoir about facing mortality. I gave birth to our daughter, Cady, and we loved each other and her. We learned directly how to struggle through really tough medical decisions. And taking care of Paul was the worst thing I've ever had to do, and also the best. The day we brought Paul into the hospital for the last time, I knew would be the worst day of my life. When he turned to me at the end and said, "I'm ready," I knew it wasn't just a brave decision, it was the right one. Paul didn't want a ventilator or CPR. In that moment, the most important thing for Paul was to hold our baby daughter. 9 hours later, Paul died. I've always thought of myself as a caregiver. Most physicians do. And taking care of Paul deepened what that meant. Watching him reshape his identity, learning to witness and accept his pain, talking together through his choices, those things taught me that resilience does not mean bouncing back to where you were before or pretending that the hard stuff isn't hard. It is so hard. It's painful, messy stuff, but it's the stuff. And I learned that when we face that kind of suffering together, we get to decide what success looks like. One of the first things Paul said to me after he was diagnosed was, "I want you to remarry after I die." It was so shocking and heartbreaking and selfless and comforting because it was so brutally honest. And it turned out that type of honesty was exactly what we needed. Really early in Paul's illness, we decided we were just going to keep saying things out loud. Tasks like filling out an advance directive became less daunting than they had once been. I realized that filling out an advance directive is an act of love. Like a wedding vow, it's a pact to take care of somebody. It codifies that vow till death do us part. No matter what happens, I will be there. If needed, I will speak for you. I will honor your wishes. That paperwork became a tangible part of our love story. And we weren't honest just with each other. Paul's oncologist opened our minds to surprising new choices. She carefully tailored his chemo so that he could keep working as a neurosurgeon, which initially we thought was totally impossible. And when the cancer progressed and he shifted from surgery to writing, his palliative care doctor prescribed a stimulant medication so he could have more focus. Paul's care team gave me an even deeper appreciation for my colleagues in healthcare. We have a tough job. We're responsible for making sure patients and families have clarity around their prognoses and illnesses and treatment options, and that's never easy, especially when you're dealing with potentially terminal illnesses like cancer. People always want to know how much time they have left, and we never know the answer. In my early career, I came to Stanford to study healthcare value. I was fascinated by research on healthcare costs, including at the end of life and cost to patients. A survey of physicians found that 55% said they had been untruthful when talking with a patient about prognosis and painted a rosier picture than their honest opinion. 1 in 4 people has said that they or a family member received excessive or unwanted care. It's understandable that we doctors might err on the side of optimistic prognoses if we think that our patients want a particular type of hope. It's an instinct born out of kindness. But research also shows that when people have a better understanding of prognosis, they have less anxiety and greater ability to plan and better bereavement outcomes in their families. Paul struggled with uncertainty about his prognosis for sure. As physicians, he and I had learned to help patients and families have a sense of the best and worst and most likely outcomes of a given illness or treatment. When we talked with them about prognosis, we didn't just land on the median, but instead a likely range, which might be days to weeks, or weeks to months, or months to years. Patients and families can struggle with these conversations, but in our family, we also found them immensely helpful when we were trying to make big decisions, most notably whether to have a baby. Months to a few years meant Paul was not likely to see her grow up, but he had a good chance of being there for her birth and the beginning of her life. I remember asking Paul during that time, "Don't you think that having to say goodbye to a child will make dying even more painful for you?" And his answer astounded me. He said, "Wouldn't it be great if it did?" So we did it, not in order to spite cancer, but because we were learning that living fully means accepting suffering. When patients and families have a sense of a likely outcome, we can make informed decisions about how we want to live. There's a passage in Paul's book where he talks about this in the medical setting, and I love it. He says, "A physician's duty is not to stave off death or return patients to their old lives, but to take into our arms a patient and family whose lives have disintegrated and work until they can stand back up and face and make sense of their own existence." That act of making sense means understanding what we each value. When Paul himself became ill, his healthcare providers asked him, "What goals do you have? What are you most worried about? What trade-offs are you willing to make or not make in your healthcare?" And Paul considered the question, "What makes my life worth living?" Paul's healthcare providers understood that living means more than just staying alive. Quality of life is vital. They knew that their job was not just to try to fix things for us, but to counsel Paul through painful choices when his body was failing, but his will to live wasn't, and to help him live well, even though they couldn't save his life. Talking, honestly and often, is the way to do that. Some of my patients choose highly aggressive care if there's any chance of longer life. Others worry more about minimizing pain or dependence on life support technology. Most worry about their loved ones. All of those wishes are valid, and it's not always quality versus quantity. Some studies have shown that for seriously ill patients, less aggressive care may actually lengthen life. But we can't know our choices if we let fear keep us from talking about what we want. Less than 30% of us have talked with our families about end-of-life choices, but we need those conversations if we're going to have some level of choice over how we live and die. Healthcare professionals understand this on some intuitive level. If you were to eavesdrop in any ICU break room, you might hear people saying things like, "Don't ever let me go this way." Half of critical care nurses and a quarter of ICU doctors have considered quitting their jobs because of distress over feeling like, for some of their patients, rather than prolonging life, they're prolonging the dying process. And it is a hard job no matter what. When Paul died, I received dozens of bouquets of flowers, but I sent just one to Paul's oncologist because I knew her heart was breaking too. We can't save every life, but we can ask questions and seek to find a patient's values and fight to respect them. That is a tangible, achievable victory. Not long after his diagnosis, Paul said to me, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay." And I said, "Yeah, we just don't know what okay looks like yet." Being okay did not mean that we could stop Paul's illness. Instead, we learned to accept both joy and sadness and to uncover beauty and purpose, both despite and because we are all born and we all die. There's a poem by W.S. Merwin. It's just 2 sentences long, and it describes how I feel now. "Your absence has gone through me like thread through a needle. Everything I do is stitched with its color." For me, that poem evokes my love for Paul and a new kind of fortitude that has come from both loving and losing him. And for all the sadness and sleepless nights, it turns out there's still joy left. I cherish my job as a physician. I take flowers to Paul's grave, and I watch our 2-year-old run around on the grass. Friends come with me, and we pour out a beer for Paul. Shepherding Paul's book through publication has opened a surprising and exciting new path for me in which I get to talk with people like you about things I really care about. And most importantly, I get to watch our daughter grow. I've thought a lot about what I'll say to her when she's older. Cady, the most important lesson is that suffering provides our greatest opportunity to love and to be loved. Engaging in the full range of experience, living and dying, love and loss, that is what we get to do. What I've learned is that cancer isn't always a battle. Death isn't a war, at least not one that we can win. Our job isn't to fight our fates necessarily, but to help each other through, not as soldiers, but as shepherds. Being human doesn't happen despite suffering. It happens within it. When we approach suffering together, when we choose not to hide from it, our lives don't diminish, they expand. And there's a victory to be found there. Thank you.